More lineup changes to come for the Leafs in tonight's game against the Boston Bruins. Is all this juggling becoming worrisome? We'll discuss on today's edition of Locked On Leafs.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the April 6th edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known as Al's brother on TSN's Overdrive and TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch. Joining me, it's my co-host, Dave Morassuti from Sportsnet, also a writer for the NHLPA. Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcast from. Check us out on YouTube as well now. Locked On Leafs on YouTube. Hit subscribe and click the notification bell. We got new videos coming out each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, and that'll alert you to when we drop them each morning. Big day. The Boston Bruins. It's always going to be an intriguing matchup when the Maple Leafs play the Boston Bruins. We'll kind of help tee up the game. Brian O'Reilly, he returns tonight, which means there's a little bit of some lineup juggling that is going on with Toronto, and we'll discuss whether or not we think it's troublesome that we're this late in the year, and that's going to still be happening here for the Maple Leafs. We'll get to all that in just a little bit, but the final, as of the recording of this podcast, the final for the Tampa Bay and New York Rangers game has now come through, and the Rangers have come out victorious against Tampa Bay. I don't know if you saw some of the highlights and some of the stuff going on Twitter. That was a physical hockey game, dude. Holy smokes. But with the Tampa Bay Lightning losing, the Leafs' magic number is 3. The magic number is Justin Hall, which means any combination of 3 points against Boston and Montreal, they could have home ice locked up by the weekend.
It's pretty nice. It'd be good to get it and not have to worry about it in the last week of the season, right? The last 3 games. I'm not saying they can coast, but they can at least say to themselves, all right, we don't have to kill ourselves trying to get ourselves 3 points in the final week of the season.
Right. 100%. And, it does allow you also to rest some guys, I suppose, make sure that you have Samsonov rest up. Most importantly, I think, and you don't have to force feed him into some games, and more importantly, have it locked down before that game against Tampa. That's what I think is most important. So if you can get it done, pick up 1 or 2 points in Boston, and then pick up a full 2 points at home against Montreal to end off your home schedule. I think that would bode very well for this team and put them in good shape for the final week. I do want to have this conversation, though, about home ice advantage because, I know that you are a believer in home ice, and as am I, so we are on the same page when it comes to that and how it would be beneficial to the Maple Leafs. But there still are some people out there that argue that it doesn't matter. And I've even had people tell me actually they think it might even be better if they start on the road, and the reasoning is because less pressure, right? Because all you got to do is split, one of those games on the road, and then you come back home with some momentum, and hopefully you pick up 2 wins there. And next thing you know, you're up 3-1 in the series. That is the kind of argument that I've heard for why maybe home ice advantage would be a disadvantage for the Maple Leafs, just because it would take some pressure off of them. But dude, like I still am of the belief that home ice advantage is definitely a helpful tool to have for the Maple Leafs this year.
Let's just say if you've seen the Tampa Bay Lightning play on the road, you want to give yourself every bit of a chance to play as many games outside of Amalie Arena as you can.
Yeah, you want to I got the record pulled up. Do you have it pulled up?
I can get that in 2 seconds.
Well, I got it for you. I'll just I guess while you're looking for it, I can say it verbally. The Tampa Bay Lightning at home are 27-7-5. 27-7-5. They got a better record than Toronto at home this season. On the road, however, the Tampa Bay Lightning under 500, 18, 20, and 1. Meanwhile, the Maple Leafs are 20, 13, and 4. Like, they actually have a decent road record despite, the Samsonov struggles out on the road. They still tend to win some games out there when they're away from Scotiabank Arena. Not as much the case for the Tampa Bay Lightning, which is interesting. Now, the playoffs, things are totally different. I understand that. But that is certainly one thing to consider, that Tampa Bay, their home record strong, road record not strong. So what does that tell you about, when they don't have that advantage of being able to dictate the matchups and having last change? Does that factor into that road record being poor? I would argue yes, especially since they're not as deep of a team as they once were, especially last year in that series against Toronto. But I think also, and we spoke about this yesterday, to me, one of the biggest things about it, like, yeah, okay, I can look at Tampa's record, but to me, it's the comfort that I have in Samsonov at home as opposed to on the road, right? Like, the stats are there, man. His home road splits are very intriguing, to the point where even Sheldon Keefe was like, yeah, I have my eye on him. I have my eye on those home road splits. And with Murray going down, it doesn't matter. He's going to play on the road anyways now. But I think ensuring 4 games at the very least on home ice, and that last one in particular on home ice, is best case scenario for the Maple Leafs.
Yeah, I mean, there's too many factors to ignore here. I can get behind the reasoning some people had, because last year the Leafs had home ice, and what happened? Tampa Bay figured if we can split one of the 2 games, the pressure's now on the Leafs to try to do the same. I mean, the Leafs ended up then splitting the 2 games in Tampa after that.
Right.
But,
It became a 3-game series.
right? The Leafs have to do whatever they can to not make this series go 6 or 7 if possible, right? 6 would be the max. And the best way you can do that is you take advantage of having that home ice, getting Samsonov's voodoo of playing at home, and just putting that all into a pot and just try to manifest ending the series as early as possible.
Yeah, if ideally, you're going back home to Toronto up 3-1 in the series and a chance to put it away in 5. That would be the most ideal scenario for the Toronto Maple Leafs, for sure. I completely agree. But I still find it funny, to be honest, that there still are those people who will argue that home ice doesn't matter. They don't care about it. And I've even had someone tell me, like, they may be better off without it, which I think is just an asinine comment, if I'm being completely honest with you. But hey, opinions are opinions, and everyone's entitled to them. And mine is the Leafs are better off with home ice than not. All right, we had a game tonight. Leafs in Boston, not in Tampa. They're in Boston tonight. Ryan O'Reilly will return to the ice, and because of that, we do have some new lineups to take a peek at, the projected lines for tonight. And we'll kind of talk about them, whether or not we think all this line moving. We saw a lot of movement in the lines in the game against Columbus yesterday, and we kind of continue to see it here against Boston in the final 2 weeks of the season. Do we like that there is still so much movement in line juggling? We'll discuss that on the other side as well. But before we do, let me tell you guys about one of today's show sponsors, and it's our favorite. It's FanDuel. The NHL playoffs are almost here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel. It's North America's #1 sports book, and because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use, and you can bet on everything from the money line to the puck line, goal scorer, shot props, whatever you want. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your best bets for a chance to win a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss out on your chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the Locked On Network. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassuti. We are still on our hunt for 3,000 subscribers on YouTube. We would really appreciate it if you are enjoying the content and haven't subscribed yet, which a lot of our views typically come from unsubscribed people. So we would love it if you would do us a favor, hit subscribe, And I believe I did say if we can get to 3,000 subscribers by the end of the first round and the Maple Leafs punch their ticket to round two, I will get a Leafs jersey with the last name placeholder on it as a little inside joke from that day. There was a random placeholder in the lineup, some UFT player or whatever, just kind of tooting around, and it was a funny little meme that was going around with the reporters who just didn't know the person, so they put placeholder instead of a last name in the Leafs lineup at practice that day. But either way, we really do want to try and grow this thing, and that's another big milestone for us. So if you're enjoying the content, please, we would appreciate a thumbs up, a like, and obviously a subscribe as well. But it's a big game tonight, in Boston, as we mentioned. If they can pick up at least 1 point, hopefully 2 points tonight, that goes a long way in locking up that home ice advantage. The magic number is 3. And if they can get 1 or 2 of those tonight, that makes it a hell of a lot easier to do in the final 4 games after this one. But the big news, obviously, is Ryan O'Reilly returning tonight for the Maple Leafs. 5 games to go. Is that enough to get him up to speed, you think, Dave?
Oh, it should be. I do think it's enough. Like if it was like 2 games, that might be like the minimum. I would say a couple games should hopefully do it because he's at least been skating. It's more so the shooting and just his conditioning. So if you give him the last 5 games, I think that should be sufficient enough.
Yeah, I'm with you. And again, it's a hand injury, not like a lower body injury. He has been skating for a while. And even today in practice, he was asked, how he's feeling. Says he feels good. No discomfort in puck battles, which is a good sign. Obviously, that's the thing that you're worried about when you have, when you're coming back from a broken finger. Is am I able to engage in those puck battles and be as efficient in that part of the game that makes Ryan O'Reilly such a great player. So hopefully that's a true statement and not just lip service. I mean, it very well could be, but if he's winning puck battles and maybe it does hurt a little bit, but he's not, not telling us or he's not letting it look like it is, then I do not care, to be quite honest with you, whether it's lip service or not. Just win those damn puck battles and I will believe you. I would expect there to be some movement tomorrow, though, because I was taking a look at Cap Friendly, and if you bring him up, you are 1 point. Like the Leafs will be $1.5 million over in cap space. But to get there, like once they activate Ryan O'Reilly, they can easily get underneath it though, and not have to put anyone on LTIR, namely Matt Murray. That's why I was checking. They could just send down Abruzzese and Wayne Simmons, and they are under the cap and won't have to make any more or any additional moves, especially to Ryan to Matt Murray. So that's just a little bit of information there. Do we want to take a look at tonight's projected lines? Because that's kind of where the conversation I think will heat up a little bit here, Dave. Because it's different, right? Like the D pairings kind of went back to what they had been. Like he put them in a blender in a game against Columbus, and now they're going exactly back to the way they were prior. So you've got McCabe back with Brody, Giordano with Hall, and then Morgan Riley alongside Luke Shen. So those to me seem to be like, this is Sheldon Keefe telling me these are 3 pairs that we feel most comfortable with. These are going to be the 3 pairings that do start come game 1 of the playoffs. Are you picking up that scent as well?
Yeah, for sure. You look at just where we discussed it and what we think was ideal, and it's funny how similar what we thought was going to happen and what ended up being coming true. Like at this point, the experimentation of trying different things is over. Now it's pretty much tinkering, the little adjustments, but you have your core pretty much together. Like I don't think basically what you're seeing right now on the screen is what I think it's going to end up being. Like
And it's what we've seen. Like I think the last 2-3 weeks, it's pretty much been this, and then randomly, like they brought in, Riley sat a game, but they would go to an 11-7 situation where Lilligren would come in and play, and Connor Timmins came and played that one game, but Usually, if no one's sitting out for load management purposes, this was typically the defensive deployment and the pairings we've seen in the last 2-3 weeks probably now. So it does make sense. They found something that they like, that they think will work, that I personally like. I mean, if we quickly break things down, like McCabe Brody has been a terrific shutdown pairing in terms of expected goals against. Their fifth best defensive pairing in the National Hockey League amongst pairs who've played just as much or more minutes than they have together at 5-on-5 this season. It's exactly what you want to see out of a shutdown pair. And then Gio and Hall, Hall, as much as people hate seeing him in the lineup because of his up and down season, a lot of people would rather see Timothy Liljegren in there, and I understand it to an extent. But Gio and Hall, they work, man. Like they have shown in the past that they can work, and it's reliable. I will at least say it is a reliable pairing. And then Morgan Riley and Luke Shen. Uh, you want to get Luke Shen in there just because of the physicality that he brings. And, he's going to go alongside Morgan Riley, who is very similar to the Quinn Hughes-esque player that he was with in Vancouver anyway. So he's used to it, and he can sit back and play that defensive style, while Riley, is the riverboat gambler he's going to be. Shen knows how to react to that. And I think that pairing will work as a more sheltered pair that's deployed more so in the offensive end than defensive end.
Yes, no, I definitely do think when you're looking at the D pairings, like I didn't mind when we saw Riley and Brody back together, just because we know it's something that they can always go back to.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think, yeah, this would be a good test to see how they do on the road and against the Boston Bruins team that is going to be physical. They are closer to that Tampa style in terms of how they play. Obviously, better than Tampa, but this is a good test for this blue line. And yeah, would I like to see Timothy Liljegren on this blue line? Yes, I very much would. But at the same time, I don't know how he would fare in a matchup like against the Bruins. So I'd like to see how this lineup does first, and then look, you can play Liljegren next week against Tampa.
Yeah, for sure. You could go that route. All right. As for the forward group, why don't we take a quick break and then come back and we can get to the forward group. Obviously, Ryan O'Reilly does check back into the game, into the lineup tonight, and he is not in the top six. Those watching on YouTube can obviously see where he's sitting at, but those who are listening in the podcast form will have to wait a moment for us to tell you exactly where he is slotted into the lineup. That's the advantage of being on YouTube. That's the advantage. You can see things that we have posted up here. So maybe that's one more reason to go and subscribe to us and watch it on YouTube. But before we do get to the forward groupings, one more word from our show sponsor.
Yes, and today's show is brought to you by Indeed. When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could handpick the best stars for your business team? If you're building your talent roster, you just need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like matching, assessment, and virtual interviews. Hate waiting? Well, Indeed does have data that shows that 80% of Indeed employees find quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed matches their job descriptions the moment they sponsor a job. Candidates you invite to apply through Instant Match are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who only see it in search, according to U.S. Indeed data. With Indeed matching, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description. Boom. It's hiring at warp speed. Indeed does all the hard work for you. Sponsor a job, and they'll match you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed fit your job description right when you post. With Indeed, you can start hiring fast. Just over 3 million businesses worldwide are using Indeed to hire great talent fast. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassuti. It's a game day. Maple Leafs heading to Boston to take on the big bad Bruins, and they're going to be a handful. I mean, it's the team that's only lost 4 games on the road in regular or at home rather in regulation all season long. They're chasing down records, NHL records this year. It's wild. It's a team that's already up to 60 victories. They've got 125 points banked on the year and are a plus 120 goal differential, which is lapping the field. Lapping the field, Dave. Like legitimately, they're a plus 120. The next best team is plus 57, and that's the New York Rangers at plus 57. Like double that. That's what? 114, I guess, with 50. Yeah, 114. They've got 120. They've got 6 more if they were to double their New York Rangers out. It's just maddening the way Boston has been going through every single team and dominating the year. And that's the next opponent for the Maple Leafs tonight. Let's pull up those forward groupings though to see if Toronto how they stack up against Boston here tonight, because again, there are some differences, and Ryan O'Reilly has returned to the lineup. So the top line will remain intact. The top 6 remains intact, similarly to the way that it did against the Columbus Blue Jackets, with Bunting, Matthews, and Yarncroc. Nylander, Tavares, and Mitch Marner remain together. The third line is where it gets interesting. Alex Kerfoot with Ryan O'Reilly and Noel Acciari. So Ryan O'Reilly checking into the 3C hole with Acciari and Kerfoot. Your thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, like we were kind of teased with the Tavares, Marner, and O'Reilly trio returning in practice. Going into the morning skate going against Columbus.
In hindsight, that was very much O'Reilly as a placeholder for
Yeah,
Nylander, who didn't
exactly.
end up skating and played in that day. In hindsight, we realize this now.
Yes, Sheldon Keefe did kind of. I mean, just he gave Nylander and a couple of other guys options to take a day out, take a skate off, and Nylander's like, yes, please. So yeah, I'm not too surprised, because I feel like out of all the lines here, that third line is the one that kind of needs some sort of identity in some way. I think if you're having O'Reilly, Acciari, and Kerfoot there, Kerfoot gives you kind of the speed and defensive play. Acciari gives you the physicality, and then O'Reilly is going to be I guess he'll be the offensive catalyst. I don't know. That's the part I'm wondering about a little bit here. Can Kerfoot create a little more offensively in that role with O'Reilly? Because that's the only part about this that I'm wondering about. Obviously, they're going to also be a little more of a checking line in that regard in defensive situations. Like that's your pure defensive forward line there. But offensively, that's where I'm wondering where it's going to come from.
Yeah, I mean there is some slight question marks, I suppose, when you're looking to find that depth scoring outside the top 6. But O'Reilly's just a gamer, man. Like I think he'll find a way to score goals. I mean, Kerfoot's as poor as his season has been. He's been a playoff performer. Like sadly, when you think of who've been some of the better Maple Leafs in the playoffs the last 3 years, Alex Kerfoot's pretty high up on that list, and that's not really a good thing, but it does mean like he can be relied upon to show up in the postseason. So he could potentially provide a little bit of offense, but I think to your point, that's mainly a checking line. They're just making sure that they can shut down, Stamkos, Kucherov, and Point, right? Like that's going to be the role potentially of Kerfoot, O'Reilly, and Acciari. And hey, look, Noel Acciari, if they end up with pucks in the offensive end and, they end up with greasy goals and they just get pucks on net, that guy's going to be parked in front and he'll be looking to get those Pat Maroon, Corey Perry-esque garbage, greasy rebound goals. And it doesn't have to be pretty, right? Because they're not always pretty for Tampa Bay. They weren't. They simply just took the puck to the net and scored, some garbage goals. I think Toronto, you look at a lot of the additions that they made. Achari, Zach Aston Reese has scored some greasy goals. Lafferty can do it. Even Yardcroc, a lot of his goals, well, not a lot of them, but a portion of his goals are coming from in tight, just picking up rebounds, right? Like the one that he scored the other night in Detroit. Pounced on a rebound and lifted it, got some height on it, and ended up in the back of the net. So I think that's a way that you could get some offense from the bottom six. Doesn't have to be pretty, buddy. It just has to go in. I think there's some guys who might be able to do it. Zach Aston Reese, Camp, and Lafferty is the fourth line. So they will continue to be the line that was pretty good in that game against Columbus. So I don't know, man. Like I am curious though if this is what Sheldon Keefe is looking at and thinking this would be an ideal forward grouping for game one. Um, or if he believes that, the lineup he had a few days ago might be more so what he wants to do with Matthews and Marner. If he wants to keep them apart. Like I am curious what Sheldon Keefe's mindset is. Just because we still have seen quite a lot of line juggling in the last week here, in particular up with the forwards.
Yeah, when you look at how it always feels like Sheldon Keefe is trying to find some sort of spark with someone, and that's why he's moving things around. Like obviously Marner being moved with Tavares and Nylander, he's trying to get those two guys going.
Well, is that just to spark them, or is this because he believes that he's going to play them together in the playoffs?
I
That's the question.
that seriously is the question. Like you look at Bunting being moved with Matthews, that screams to me also about trying to get Bunting going, because we've also seen Kerfoot move up and flip spots with Bunting, right? So I do think that it would be in the Leafs' best interest if you see Marner getting Tavares and Nylander going, and they're not bad defensively as a unit, just keep that unit together. And we've seen Matthews take his game and go to back to that level that we expect it to be, and that's why I'm okay with leaving that. See how that trio does. If they can handle it, then it just makes your lineup that much deeper. And I this right now looks more like the lineup I expected to see from the Leafs, where it's top to bottom, like bottom top to bottom. You can see every line could contribute in some way versus, stacking up the top two lines, and then you're just like, well, bottom six, you just gotta hope and pray that they do something.
Wow, you've come full 180 here, haven't you? You
Mm.
are very much O'Reilly top
Yeah.
six, and now here you are wanting to spread the wealth. Look at you.
Well, look at what they did against Columbus. I was impressed with what I saw from Marner, Tavares, and Nylander. Right, like that looked like a line at 5-on-5 can can do some things that maybe weren't able to. Like I just wasn't sure about the Marner Nylander being on that same line together. Like how if that would work with
Yeah,
Tavares.
I'm still not completely convinced of that, and that's only just because we haven't really seen it. I mean, it should work. Like they're three really good players. There's no reason why they shouldn't be able to work together. But again, we just kind of have to see it. So getting a second game of it, I think, is actually a good thing. And to play against a team like Boston, who you're going to have to fight to generate scoring against a team like this, who's quite literally the best defensive team in hockey, number one in terms of goals against a game, and then when it comes to limiting offense, which is also something that I'm sure that trio and the whole team, I guess, is going to have to try and do. Oh, they happen to also be the number two offense in the entire NHL in terms of goals per game. So, yes, it will be a massive, massive challenge tonight. But I think it's good to get another look at that trio against the best team, because they just got to look against the worst team, and it was like, all right, look good, but what do they look like against the playoff team? Now we'll find out in this game against Boston.
Exactly. Like you can only know this game against Boston is coming up not only at the best time, but it's the exact test that this team needs, because we know Boston isn't letting up at all. They're not a team that's going to take their foot off the gas, even though they've clinched pretty much. They have nothing left to play for.
Buds, they
Uh,
have records to play for. Records.
Yeah, I mean, the records are nice in the regular season, but they also want to make sure that they're ready for the playoffs as well.
I think they will be, but also, I mean, they're such a deep team that even if they sat, dude, they sat Bergeron and Marchand like a couple weeks ago and beat the Carolina Hurricanes. They sat those guys and still beat Carolina. It was one of the best teams in the East after Boston. Like that's how deep this team is, and only getting deeper too once Nick Foligno and Taylor Hall come back for playoff time. They've essentially been Kucherov'd. But they'll be back for game one, and things won't get any easier for their opposition. Hopefully, that will be Toronto in round two. But hopefully, the Leafs can withstand it. All right, buddy. Any other final comments you want to make today regarding this game, or anything else that's percolating in the brain?
Well, I mean, obviously we talked about Samsonov a little bit. I want to see how he does against a good team.
Hmm.
Like he hasn't. Like if you look at the last little bit here, like Samsonov, I don't think has been challenged. I think in a way that I like to see him be challenged. Like he's played some against some good teams, but he hasn't played against a lot of elite teams.
Let me see who his last starts have been against: Detroit, Ottawa, Florida, the Islanders, and Carolina. Carolina's probably the best team there. I mean, Florida gave him a run for his money, I suppose. But yeah, to your point, he hasn't been playing, the best teams in the NHL of late.
Yeah,
Now
but
he is the best team, actually, and pretty much his final big test before the playoffs, right? Like he'll get one of those games in Florida, either the Panthers or the Lightning. I hope it's the Panthers. I don't want him going anywhere near Tampa Bay in that game. But this will be his biggest final test to tune things up and to see how he goes up against some top tier talent, and ultimately how he does that on the road, which has been a struggle for him. But his last start was a 3-0 shutout on the road, but it was Ottawa. What can he do against Boston?
exactly. Like that's what I want. Like at this point, you got to test yourself in some way, and these are the perfect games to do that. And you know, like just we've seen the Leafs have pretty brutal results against the Bruins too. Like it'd be nice to see them kind of tell Boston, hey, we can actually beat you.
Well, they've played 3 times this year: a 5-2 loss, a 4-3 loss in Toronto, which was actually a really good game, if I recall.
It was
And then
the
they,
other way. It was a 5-2 loss in Toronto, 4-3 loss in Boston.
oh, yes, I had flipped. Yes, you are correct.
And then the other one in Toronto, which was like a
Toronto, they won 2-1 early in the season. I think Matthews had like both those goals, didn't he, in that game? 2-1 win?
the only thing I really remember from that game was when Samsonov knocked. Oh my
Blew
god!
his knee, right, against on the penalty
Why
shot.
did I mention that?
We're riding a high, Dave, and then you had to bring that up. You had to bring it up. Well, let's pray for no penalty shots in this game.
Oh my god! Yeah, if
Like if
something
this one
happens,
if this has to go to shootout,
get him out, get him out of there.
like with you get a whistle with like 3 seconds left in overtime and switch out the goalie. Joseph, we need your services, please. You're going to take care of business. We only need to get 1 point. 1 point is successful. It's been secured. If you can get the second point, great. And hey, he's a Boston guy. He went to Boston College, so I'm sure he would be more than happy to do that.
Or I might have to go and get the Malocchio, make sure Samsonov is protected.
Yes, absolutely. Get the pepper all over that guy. All right, buddy. Anything else you want to get to?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think we pretty well covered things here. All right, good stuff. Enjoy the game tonight, guys. Should be a goodie. That'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasts and platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassuti. Leave a like on this video if you liked it, and a comment down below. your thoughts on Ryan O'Reilly slotting in as 3C. Is this what you expected? Is this an optimal lineup? What does your ideal lineup look like if you had Sheldon Keefe's job and could formulate your own little ideal lineup card? Let us know down below as well. But that'll do it for us today. We'll be back tomorrow. We will recap the game against the Boston Bruins. Until then, though, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.